Hey guys, this is part 2 of China Roads, A Journey into the Future of a Rising Power by Bob Gifford, NPR correspondent. So I got interrupted on the first session, but I was talking about Mr. Gifford in central China, specifically in the Gansu province, and the minority peoples. Now before we move into Western China, I just want to cover two things about sexuality, in sort of the mainland part of China that I failed to mention the first time. The first is sort of anecdotal in that he was covering Western restaurants that have come into China with the opening up of the country since 1980. And he covered the generic basics, you know, McDonald's, Burger King, KFC, which is huge over there. But one of the other ones that he mentioned, Pizza Hut, one of the other ones that he mentioned that kind of had a unique twist to it was that the first Hooters restaurants are opening in China. Now, if you don't know what Hooters is, it's an American sit-down restaurant chain that is sort of like a sports bar. But what's unique about it is that all the waitresses dress up in skimpy little outfits and really kind of flirt with their customers to try to get tips. It's definitely more on the innocent end of the sexually provocative scale. It's just basically like hot chicks are your waitresses. But you know, it is what it is there. One of the things that he mentioned though is that the name Hooters restaurant, Hooters is a double entendre for both Hooters like owls, which is the mascot of the restaurant, and for breast, for female breasts. And of course, in China, the double entendre doesn't work because it's an English language specific double entendre and it doesn't work in Mandarin. So what they actually call the restaurant there is the American Owl Restaurant, which is sort of a pretty blocky name for kind of a innocent but comely name of a place you can go and flirt with your waitress and not get in trouble. The second thing I wanted to mention is that he actually mentioned he went to a karaoke bar in China, and he mentioned that a good chunk of karaoke bars, actually I mentioned two things about sexuality here. That a lot of karaoke bars are actually fronts for prostitution. Now, you can go there and sing karaoke and have fun with your friends. In China, it's called KTV actually. It's not called karaoke because karaoke is the Japanese name for it, and of course the Chinese don't want anything to do with the Japanese as they have a historical rivalry. But they're called KTVs, and unlike in Western karaoke, you don't go in front of a large bar or group of people and sing in front of them. What you do is you rent a room, and you and your friends, be they anywhere from 2 or 3 of them to, I don't know, even 15 to 20 if you rent a large enough room, will go and sing karaoke there. And you can do that, that's fine, that's all innocent. But what a lot of karaoke bars will do is that they'll have hostesses, which will come in for more like the male clientele and be flirty and, feed food in your mouth and, maybe give you a innocent massage or, just like a regular massage. But then for an additional fee, that's kind of the unspoken fee that you can pay later, they'll have sex with you. It's like I said, a front for prostitution. He also mentioned that this is the case in a lot of hotels, and actually one of the hotels in the Western region, which is good because this is what I'm getting to, provided in their room service pamphlet, all males are given free massage, and he kind of tactfully asked around at this. This is on, right? Hold on a second. Yeah. Okay. Sorry guys. He tactfully asked around at this hotel what this exactly meant, and eventually one of the like bellhops or employees at the hotel in Western China. Now, Western China is a big frontier region. Essentially said that it means you can go and get a hooker, and the hotel will pay for it. It's included in the price of the room, and for all males, it's just free of charge. You know, and this isn't some skeezy hotel. This is like the equivalent of what the Sheraton would be, or some, you know, center of town, high rise, nice hotel complex. It also said in the pamphlet that if women want a massage, they'd have to call ahead of time. So I don't even want to know, well, like what that entails. Not that it could be much worse than a prostitution ring. But anyway, I was in the Gansu province, was the area I was specifically focusing on. This is the region before we get into the Zhejiang Uyghur Autonomous Region, which is in the far west. So this is sort of like the west, but just outside of the Han territory. And I had mentioned that he had gone to, I think, the abortion clinic thing, and the truckers. I mentioned the truckers that gave him a hitch. The truckers were trying to avoid the police, and a lot of details about the life on the road and, you know, what they are and all that stuff. Two of the kind of historical places that he saw is he went to Jiayuguan, which is the very end of the Great Wall, and because this part of China bottlenecks, this is essentially along the Silk Road right now. So the Route 312, which I told you was the route that he's going from one end of China to the other, parallels what the old northern Silk Road was. But in this area of Gaijuan, where the Great Wall ends, is also where there's sort of a bottleneck in the geography of China, in that this is like the most northern arc of the Tibetan Plateau, which is obviously impenetrable except for the most hardy of nomads. So most of the barbarians couldn't get in from that direction. And to the north, it's some of the greatest extent of the Gobi Desert, which is so barren and so lifeless that a lot of people barbarians couldn't come in through that way. So what they had to do is they had to go through this little fort area that's kind of like far on the far western end of China. And there is a huge fort there. I think he said it was like 3 football fields by 3 football fields of surrounded gated area. Something like that. It was something big and ridiculous. But I went there and said he enjoyed it. Maybe a little bit too many Chinese tourists, but it was just kind of a very big thing because it was the end of historical Han China. It should be stated that although the Han Chinese claim territories west of here within their, past their history, it's obviously part of China now, within their past and their history, really any areas west of Gaiyuzhuang, I'm probably pronouncing that wrong, were really only marginally in the sphere of China up until I think it was the late 1700s. But then from the 1700s up until about 1950, it was only nominally in control. Or there was very, very loose control of the territory, largely just sort of a local warlord rule or even anarchy. The other historical place he went to is the Cave of 10,000 Buddhas near Duanhang. Now, the Cave of 10,000 Buddhas are artificial caves carved out by ancient pilgrims traveling from India to China, and was one of the key historical spots in the spread of Buddhism from India to China. And it's essentially in a very, I should say there's a oasis there, which is why that there's a settlement there at all, I guess you'd say, but outside of that, it's very barren. We're looking Gobi Desert, die in the middle of the desert territory here. Um, and so the caves were lost, like they weren't known, all the way up until the early 1900s. I want to say like 1906, 1907. So they were formed between the 4th century and the 11th century, and then were found in 1906. And the reason that they fell off in the 11th century was this area was Buddhist up until then, but after then it became Muslims or Islamic, and the Islamic religion, they didn't destroy it, but they just kind of deserted it. They had no reason for it. So it was founded in it was rediscovered in 1906 by pilgrim monks, or not pilgrim monks, but like a monk within the region. It led to one of the most infamous cases in Chinese history of Western looting. And essentially what happened is these caves were opened up by, I want to say, like Westerners. I think it was a Swedish guy or maybe a guy from Holland were the first ones there. But anyway, during this time period, like the early 1900s, was when China was at its weakest. And so it was really putting up very little resistance to Western influence, particularly Western influence in such a remote region as these caves in what is Western China. You know, the historical seat of China being in the east, being in Beijing, Shanghai, Nanjing, etc., etc. And so what happened is these historical caves, which there were like hundreds of them, and they were like these huge statues and all sorts of religious artifacts and relics and frescoes and everything, were largely looted by Western powers and then brought into museums where they still remain today. You know, the British History Museum, the French Museum of History. I don't know the specific names, but they're in a lot of these museums, and there's still a big controversy to this day whether they should be left in those museums or whether they should be transported back to China. Now, I will say as a caveat, even though you would think that this looting is terrible, they probably would not have only been looted but been destroyed if they had remained in these caves during the Cultural Revolution period under Mao Zedong. Maybe not completely, but certainly a chunk of them would have been destroyed. And you know, he goes into that and how what little was left, Mao Zedong essentially he what do I want to say? He concreted over the top of these caves so no one could reach them. So after the Cultural Revolution ended, people had to go in with pickaxes and break through this concrete to get back to where these historical caves were, essentially shutting them off for a second time. And then Rob travels into the Uyghur Autonomous Region and talks about just some of the stuff in that area, how the Uyghurs have really provided or been kind of a thorn in the side of modern China, in that I would say of all the minority groups within China, even the Tibetans, they are the furthest removed ethnically from the Han Chinese. They're really a Central Asiatic people, much closer to Kazakhstan or Uzbekistan than they are to the Han Chinese. The reason that they have this, though, is like I said, in the 1700s, the Qing invaded, took over the territory, they marginally controlled the territory, and then there was really no central government to claim like an independence in the like 18 or 1950s or whatever. So Mao Zedong just sent all his troops in and reoccupied the territory with, his strong focus on the military. The Uyghur Autonomous Region is one of the fastest growing regions in all of China, primarily because of its resource base. Now, Eastern China is a huge manufacturing area, but that creates an incredible hunger for oil resources, coal resources, different types of alloy and metal resources, all of which, or not all of which, but like some of which are provided by, on a huge economic scale, the Uyghur Autonomous Region. Now this has created like a lot of conflicts between the Uyghurs and ethnic Chinese, specifically in how in a lot of cities, almost two cities develop that never interact with each other, There's very little attempt made at social cohesion between the groups. And that's the Han Chinese and, like I said, the Uyghurs. And it's just sort of like a incongruent city almost. Very vibrant city because of the growth or whatever. I'm specifically talking about the big city, Urumqi here, but also like smaller cities such as Kashgar and Turpan. What else? He mentions that he goes out camping with a Uyghur family, and they continue to display disgust, but there's only so much they can do because basically this territory is never going to gain independence. It's just way too within the control. I mean, that's sort of like saying, oh, well, Arkansas is going to declare independence in the United States today. Now, I'm not talking Civil War, I'm talking today. Like, that's not going to happen. That's just not something that's going to happen. But that still doesn't mean that the Uyghurs are satisfied with the system. What else? I guess a couple of the sites he goes to is he goes to the Flaming Mountains, which look like mountains with iron ore in them. So in like river ravines and areas that are kind of cut into the mountain naturally, they look like they're on fire. He goes to Tainchi, or the Lake of Heaven, which is in another mountain range and is like a high altitude lake. And so like out in the middle of the desert there's like nothing, but then there's this mountain range, and because the mountains are high enough up, they actually get some precipitation. And so he says it's really strange because it looks like a small slice of Switzerland, or I don't know, Colorado, has been transported into the middle of the Gobi Desert out in western China. He also talks about Turpan, which is a mid-sized city famous for its grape growing. Provides like, I couldn't believe this was true, but like 1/4 of the world's raisins, something like that. That's insane. And then he goes to Urumqi, mentions some of the urban discontent that I mentioned, kind of the incongruency of the Muslim bazaar markets and just sort of the Middle Eastern way of life, and then the very sort of business high-rise building, glass building, modernist 21st century Han Chinese way of life. Then he goes a little bit beyond that, kind of goes to the border. I don't really have too much to say around the border region. I know there was few other things that he said. He kind of ended it by focusing on what the role of China is going to be in the future, but I really think I've either A, covered that already, or B, it's really not what the majority of the story is about. So I think I'm going to leave it there. This was a really good book. The number one reason I would recommend it is just because of how easy of read it is. It's not overly, although it provides a lot of information, it's not overly technical. And also the fact that he's on a road trip means that he doesn't get bogged down in like one storyline too long. So, a storyline might be 10 or 15 pages of interest, but then he moves on to the next storyline, which of course is something completely different and equally interesting, because there are thousands of interesting things that are going on all over China during this time period. So recommended. China Road, A Journey into the Future of a Rising Superpower by Bob Gifford. Alright, you guys, I'll try to keep some more of these up. I know it's been a while since I've done a book review, so China Roads. I feel like I should have something more to say, but so maybe go check it out. It's a picture. Bob Gifford. Robert Gifford. Rob Gifford. Alright, bye, you guys.